Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this world premiere of Power in the Desert. My name is Chris Benner. I'm director of the Institute for Social Transformation at the University of California, Santa Cruz, which is one of the co-sponsors of this event. We also want to thank the other co-sponsors of this event, which include Philanthropy California and the Equity Research Institute at the University of Southern California. Power in the Desert is a documentary that lifts up voices from communities impacted by new lithium developments in Argentina, Chile, and California, highlighting some of the dilemmas, the challenges, and opportunities in this moment. This virtual event is the first public release of the full 55-minute documentary. Following the screening of the film, we'll be hosting a discussion with two special guests, including Daniela Flores, who's the executive director of Imperial Valley Equity and Justice, who you'll meet in the film, and the filmmaker himself, Argentine filmmaker and documentarian Emiliano Rodriguez Nuesch. That conversation will be moderated by my co-author and longtime friend and collaborator, Manuel Pastor, who's director of the Equity Research Institute. As you're watching and listening, watching the film and listening to the discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So at any time, you can submit questions by clicking on the Q&A function, which is on the side of your screen, in the Vimeo screen, and we'll try and answer as many of those questions as we can. And be aware that the film, we're going to show it fully to the end with all of the credits. The film itself is fully bilingual, English with Spanish subtitles or Spanish with English subtitles. The discussion following the film will be in English, but it will be recorded and be available on our website with Spanish subtitles after the discussion. So, la película es completamente bilingüe. La discusión posterior será en inglés, pero se grabará y estará disponible en nuestro sitio web con subtítulos en español después de la discusión. Before introducing the filmmaker, we acknowledge that this event is being broadcast from multiple lands. We want to acknowledge the Tongva peoples of what is now known as the Los Angeles area. We want to acknowledge the Kumeyaay, the Cahuilla, the Quetzan, the Cocopah, and Pai Pai of what is now Imperial Valley. Also, the Awaswas and Mutsun-speaking people of what is now known as the Santa Cruz region and the Amamutsun tribal band who are stewarding this land today. And the multiple indigenous peoples of what is now the corners of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile that make up the lithium triangle. And that includes the Atacameño, the Coya, the Quechua peoples, but there are many others who live in that area that we'll hear a bit more about. And so now, without further ado, to help introduce the film and give us a few words of context, I'd like to welcome the filmmaker to say a few words about the film before we get started. So Emiliano Rodriguez Nuesch, he's a documentarian and risk communication expert from Argentina, and he's director of the communications agency Pacifico. So Emiliano, over to you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thank you everyone for connecting today. This film is an invitation for all of you to do the same journey that I did, visiting 3 amazing deserts in the north of Argentina, the north of Chile, and southern California. It was a transformational experience, and I hope that for all of you it's an opportunity to take less things for granted when we discuss new energies or the clean energies and the energy transitioning. I learned a lot in the process about what sustainable development is, about what environmental justice is, but most importantly, this happened through conversations with amazing people in these 3 places. So I hope that you fall in love with all of them like I did, and that you see this problem or opportunity, or that you see this so-called lithium promise from the perspective of their eyes. of the people that live in the places where lithium is extracted or where it is about to be extracted, and to ask, to see what are their concerns, their questions, their worldviews, the way they see the world, because these are very unique places. But let's watch the film. We'll be here after the transmission to engage in a conversation with all of you, so prepare your questions. Thank you again for connecting today, and I hope that you really enjoy it.
I'm Manuel Pastor. I'm one of the co-hosts for this film and director of the Equity Research Institute at USC. We're now going to have the opportunity to have a discussion with the filmmaker and one of the stars of the film, Daniela Flores. Before I bring them on, quisiera decir algunas palabras en español otra vez, que la película seguramente completamente bilingüe, pero cuando ya llegamos a esta parte de la discusión, este es en inglés. Pero después de esta exposición, vamos a tener un recording que se puede mirar después, que va a ser en inglés, en español. Entonces, so thank you, and let's bring into the discussion Daniela Flores and Emiliano Rodriguez Nuesch. Welcome to you both.
Hi, Manuel.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here.
Daniela, I want to start with you. You are one of the stars of the film when we get to the Salton Sea part. And I just kind of want to ask two questions and give you time to answer them. First, what are your reactions to the film? And then second, just as important, bring us up to date. Since the film was made, I think the interviews were almost 9 months ago. What has changed? What's moved forward with the community struggles to secure benefits from lithium development? Daniela.
Thank you. And thank you for everybody that's joining us this evening. So grateful to be here. I'll just share that, I'm part of an organization called Imperial Valley Equity and Justice. I am speaking a bit on behalf of a group that's called Valley United for Community Benefits, Valle Unido por Beneficios Comunitarios. So I did just kind of want to share that right off the bat, since this is a coalition that we've built, and I'll answer more on that second question. But my reaction, I absolutely loved the film. I thought that it really brings together the struggles of different communities, and in many ways the extraction and the environmental impacts that we have seen and that are conveyed through the film in other parts of the world really help remind us of the importance of maintaining the land and the people like at the center of this, and not brushing off some of the potential impacts. I think it really does unite us in a global struggle to ensure that our people and our planet is protected, while we balance the needs to move away from fossil fuels and into more, cleaner energy. So my reaction was that I loved it. I loved being able to meet people from other countries that are experiencing this, and in many ways seeing what other more harmful forms of extraction have, essentially what their communities are like many years into that extraction. It just kind of it allows us to see behind the curtains of what communities go through. And there were some similarities in how we see industry play a role in trying to just sort of like be within community and sort of like give community certain things. But at the end of the day, they're real systemic and environmental issues that may be, left from the extraction. So that was sort of my reaction to it. I absolutely love that it does connect us in the struggle. The film, allows us to see the humans behind the other countries that are going through a similar situation, and to bring the community and the audience up to speed. As I mentioned at the beginning, and actually before I forget, just to say, with my reaction of how I do feel like it brings us closer together, the different folks fighting this or advocating for their community, or just being aware that this is happening in their community. I think this film reminds us that we can be in solidarity with each other, and that we do demand from all over the world that there are environmental mitigations, that we do protect the people, and that we don't prioritize profits over people and our environment. So with that, I can share a little bit about what's been going on. And so, as I mentioned, with Valley United for Community Benefits, or Valle Unido for short, we really are calling for a people-centered Lithium Valley. The term Lithium Valley was not coined by the people of Imperial Valley. It was coined by the governor, by the government, by the state government. And so in many ways, our community, you know, is starting to refer to themselves as Lithium Valley in some cases, when ultimately this can be a once in a generation economic opportunity for us. But we also recognize that taxpayers are funding the lithium extraction, right? We're not asking for any favors as community. We know that companies have received over $1.5 billion in tax credits and subsidies just in Imperial County. So you can imagine how many subsidies they're receiving all over this country in order to develop lithium in a cleaner way. So we do hope that, and Valle Unido really hopes that, there is a community voice that helps shape the developments in lithium. We don't want to be like an afterthought. We don't want to be a conversation that just happens later. Just like the construction of the plants are planned for now, we also want to plan for community benefits now. And we want to ensure that the community can participate, that, if this gets done, that it brings good, safe local jobs, does deliver better benefits. But right now, we also see that the Imperial County, that whole region, the 52,000 acres that you all saw in the film, it's currently being rezoned. It's part of what could be called a master plan, but they call it a Lithium Valley specific plan. And 52,000 acres are being reconsidered of the land use that can be used there. And so it's a very important moment for us right now to ensure that this Lithium Valley specific plan is done right. And but it does present an opportunity. But unfortunately, in that plan, you'll see that there's like data centers being called for. Data centers have nothing to do with lithium extraction. And data centers right now, they're targeting communities like ours that have water scarcity, but they're targeting communities like ours for these data centers. And essentially, they're trying to package that in part of the Lithium Valley. So for now, I can say that, we do hope that Imperial County uses this opportunity for a specific plan to outline a vision for responsible development. This is a critical moment, that not only can create family sustaining and high road careers, but that we emphasize and really center the protection of the environment. And so we believe that a community benefit agreement is a tool that can help with that. But at the same time, I do want to be clear, there are not a single community benefit agreements between the three companies of lithium extraction. Berkshire Hathaway, Control Thermal Resource, and ES Minerals, there's no existing community benefit agreements to date. But our coalition does hope that those opportunities are there, and that there is, even our government, does more to support these kinds of agreements that are legally binding.
Thank you, Daniela. Thank you for both being one of Emiliano's biggest fans right now and for bringing us up to date on this exciting development of Valle Unido. Emiliano, this film is a story of your journey. What prompted you to get on this path, and what was your biggest learning along the way?
Well, it all started with a wonderful conversation with you and Chris last year, about the book that you were writing and that you were about to publish. And I learned so much about your studies of the social economic processes and conditions of the people living in the Salton Sea, and about the energy transition happening in the US. And it was a question that triggered the whole journey, like what's happening in South America. And of course, I come from Argentina. I was really curious to visit the north of my country and the north of Chile to be able to compare and create a story about how different communities are going through these transformations in completely different cultural contexts. Sometimes the landscapes can be similar to each other for moments, but the cultures living there are so different. So your book was inspirational, and for me it was an opportunity to do this journey and to learning the process, and to hopefully invite people watching the documentary to, as I said, to ask better questions. And I think my work is about, in different contexts, to connect long distance communities that suffer similar problems or go through similar transformations in completely different contexts. And this is what I'm really interested in. So hopefully this will allow for shared learnings. We want to also do a screening of this in South America, both in Chile and Argentina, and hopefully the strategies or the things that each community is doing in these processes are inspiring for the others, the other communities in other countries. I see so many different levels of isolation, right? So hopefully this documentary and this story is a connector. And also, ideally, maybe it's too ambitious, who knows? But I think it's also an opportunity for each of us to reflect on what we can do once we learn about these realities, because there are things that we can do, like you can visit those places. And in visiting the north of Argentina, Chile, you can be a conscious tourist and learn about what the local community struggles, and you can support the local organizations like Daniela's. They do a wonderful work and they need your support. So this is another thing you can do to make a contribution. And also, this is something I learned from Chris and you, Manuel. You can be a conscious consumer, right? When you buy an electric car, or even if you change the cell phone every year, you may want to reflect on what are the realities of the people that made those devices and cars possible, and what are the conditions in which they live. I sometimes, so these are exceptions, but sometimes I bought chocolate or coffee that brings a label and tells about the realities of the people who worked and made that possible. My question is, can that exist for, and Chris told me about that, can that exist for an electric battery? That would be really interesting. So these are a few thoughts on how it happened, and hopefully what the film achieves when it reaches new audiences.
Well, it's beautiful, and you've both kind of addressed this question of why it was important that it was transnational. Daniela, I'm hoping you could talk a little bit about why it's also important that it's intergenerational. I mean, one of the things that's sort of striking about your story is the way in which young people came back to Imperial Valley during the COVID crisis and saw the stark inequalities and helped to form new organizations to address it. Can you talk a little bit about this generational compact as well?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Pastor. And I think that first and foremost, I'm very inspired to see how much residents of all ages have responded to our group and to like the different, the art or the social justice through art that we bring, or just trying to get really creative with engaging people. And so from the very beginning, as you mentioned, when we started the Imperial Valley Equity and Justice. We started as a mutual aid, as it was a volunteer mutual aid and advocacy group. And what we noticed really quick was that we came back during the pandemic because there was a lot of injustice. Of course, we've known about it, we've lived it, but I think coming back with some of us had to go away to go to college, work, or different reasons, but it brought us back. And what it brought us back with a lot of more perspective about what we can see in our communities that are thriving. We got to live in communities that thrive, with governments that make decisions that help their communities thrive. And so we came back with that motivation that we do deserve that in Imperial Valley as well. And also, so essentially, what we've been able to do is, through our approach, we've been able to attract people of all ages, but we do end up being on the younger side when you compare us to who is representing us, right? At the boards, at the councils and different things. So we end up showing up and, we know we look different than those that represent us, but it's also been really special to see how young people have like, of course, young people can engage with policy. Of course, young people can engage with envisioning what future they want to see in their communities. And so for us, it's very empowering and energizing to see young people respond to this. And we've been able to have, again, incorporating art. We have a magazine that has the Lithium Valley edition that aims to bring audiences of all kinds of ages, but drawing them in with color, drawing them in with vibrancy, drawing them in with pictures and different creative ways of bringing people in. And so, some of the youngest people that we used to work with might have been now it's like 14, 13, but when we first started they were like 19. Some of those people are still working with us, organizing with us, and now they're moving into their mid 20s. Some of us are going into our mid 30s, and so it is beautiful to be able to do this work, literally extending your hand to the next generation with every year that passes by, literally every generation that keeps coming by, and just encouraging more people that are either outside of the county, that are originally from here, that are going to school, trying to find opportunities to keep them connected to their community, to their roots in Imperial Valley. If they're in college, can they do a project that's on the topic of Salton Sea, right? And if they're here for the summer, and before college, how can we engage them on a project about a local community issue that they care about, so that hopefully when they go out into the world, they can hang on in their hearts to Imperial Valley, and who knows, maybe they'll come back and want to help us, continue addressing some of these issues.
Thank you, Daniela. When I hear that the generational bridge is between teenagers and 30-year-olds, it makes the 68-year-old feel muy viejo, muy viejo. Emiliano, I'd like to ask a question that's we didn't think about before, but I'm struck by it. I think Daniela would probably agree. Your humility. I feel like everywhere you went, you just listened carefully. That even when we proposed doing this film event, you wanted to make sure that the stage was shared with someone like a Daniela, rather than just the filmmaker going, me creo muy muy, I believe myself to be very, very. Can you talk about the role of humility for a community-engaged filmmaker, community-engaged scholar, even community activists?
Um, Interesting question, unexpected. So I work in communications, and an important part of communications is listening, right? And when you do documentaries, I would say that the best part of it is meeting new people and listening to them. And after many years doing communications campaigns, I always thought that I always regretted that the conversations that I had in the process were not part of the final product. And when you do documentaries, the conversations can be part of the final product. This is the wonderful conversations that I had. So in a way, I'm not sure if it's humility, but it's like genuine curiosity and willingness to meet people in new realities and universes in a way, because these are like really, really unique places. And at the same time, this was a team effort. I learned a lot from you guys, going around, moving around the Salton Sea and meeting people there. So it was a team effort, and the starting point and the inspiration was your book. So hopefully the story here is a connector, and I tried not to like bring myself too many of my opinions. I still do not agree with myself in important aspects and topics that we discuss in this film, and I think that is good, because you're not like trying to influence the person who watch, and all of you, or the audience watching it. It's about bringing you what I saw and the questions that I thought of and the perspective of these people. Some people are really happy to have a job in the mining company. And of course, I respect that. At the same time, I was curious about it. What is it like to be cooking for 1,200 people at 12,000 feet above the ground, like 15 consecutive days with without meeting your family? Those are extreme realities. I'm curious about that. And Roque, the cook there, he's proud of that. And my humility is like to be able to listen and to learn, and hopefully record it and bring something that is meaningful to you. There were really interesting questions. One of you asked, like, you're a social worker. I interviewed a social worker. What role do I feel that we can fulfill in this promise of clean energy? And to be honest,
And that was by the way, that was my closing round for each of you, is what role can people play in a clean and just energy future? Why don't you, for each of you, 90 seconds, then we'll bring Chris back. Emiliano.
I don't have an ultimate answer, but I mentioned a few hints that I think for me were something that I learned in the process. If you visit these places and you do the tourism with these local communities, you're helping make those realities visible, and you're engaging in the conversation, and you can support those communities, those local NGOs. These are places and communities that is worth visiting. At the same time, just to try to reflect when we buy the car or get the cell phone, try to think of all the realities behind, and hopefully there will be some initiatives that make that transparent in the future, like I mentioned, with chocolate or coffee. I hope that, yeah, those are my 2 cents.
Let's go to Daniela for her 90 seconds. What role can people play to be supportive of your efforts to play a positive role in a clean and just energy future?
Yes. Well, in everywhere where you live, and if you are in United States, we know that we do have a new administration that could bring differences in the environmental protections and regulations. So one of the main things is just to be, paying attention to any listservs, any like calls from environmental justice advocates asking for the nation to call their representatives to ensure that environmental protections remain. And more locally, I would absolutely agree that if you're in the region, or even if you're in California, this is one of the main one of the main lithium extraction projects in California. And if you live in California, this is important to you, it matters as well. And so you can be contributing to the comments from you can go to imperialcounty.org/LVSP if you want to submit a comment. And just following us on social media, giving us a like, sharing donations to anyone that you see that is part of the resistance. And just whenever there are calls for mobilization, that you're able to also respond. And then lastly, that you do push back about the narrative, you push back about the larger conversations of the kind of transportation systems that do need to evolve for us to use fewer batteries generally. And and so just being critical and thoughtful of that.
I'm going to bring Chris back on, and on the way, just say that I also think as much as we need to be responsible consumers, we also need to be active advocates, because as much as we consume with responsibility and conscience, we need to make sure that the government regulations are in place to protect communities from environmental hazards and to guarantee that developments actually yield community benefits. So let's do mutual aid, but let's do some marches too. Chris, close us out.
Yeah, I want to first thank Manuel, thank Emiliano for making the film, thanking Daniela for all that you do and for being with us here today. I want to make sure we acknowledge all the people behind the scenes who've made the event possible today. The folks on Manuel's team at the Equity Research Institute, including Lauren Perez, Austin Mendoza, the folks at USC who help with the technical aspects of this, including Jesse Fair. There's other folks at UC Santa Cruz who really help with the organizing, the planning, and the media, including Evan Knight, Lady Velasquez, Allison Sorgel. I'm sure I've forgotten others. We definitely see you. Thank you for your help. Thank you to all our co-sponsors, including, of course, ERI, the Institute for Social Transformation, and Philanthropy California. But most of all, thank you to all of you who came today and who care about the communities affected by lithium mining and all the issues that we need to address in this transition to a clean energy future, and making sure that we do not have sacrifice zones and that those communities are really leading the struggles, both in the collaborations and in the marches that Manuel talked about to make that better future. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week.